everyone, thank you very much for joining us for today's webinar brought to you by UK University Search. Today is the first of our Results Day webinar series, a series of 3 webinars taking place every day at 12, leading up to Results Day on Thursday, to ensure you have the most up-to-date information from universities and to give you the chance to ask any questions you have and receive a response from university experts. Today's topic is predicted grades, and we've got 2 fantastic panelists here to talk to you about how these new calculated grades, which are going to be issued on Thursday instead of exam results. First up, we'll be talking to Jonathan from the University of Liverpool. Jonathan is going to break down what these new predicted grades are, how they've been calculated, and what kind of impact they might have on Results Day and university admissions this year. Jonathan is also the head of HELOA, which is an organisation which represents UK universities, and they liaise with organisations such as UCAS and Ofqual. So he's really the best person to talk you through exactly how unis and exam boards are organising your results this year. Then we'll talk to Alex from the University of Derby about what you can do if your grades feel disappointing, or if you feel you could have achieved better if you've been able to sit your exams, or if those grades have resulted in you missing the results you needed to get into your first or insurance choice university. We know that this has been a crazy and difficult year for you, and the Results Day is going to be a little bit different this year. So we hope that this webinar will help to reassure you that everyone is working really hard to ensure your grades are accurate and fair, and that there are lots of options out there for you, no matter the grades you receive on Thursday. If you have any questions you'd like to ask our panelists today, the Q&A will be open throughout the session for you to submit any questions you have, and we'll get a response back to you either on the chat or we'll answer the questions live at the end of the session. If you're watching on Zoom, please click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to submit a question. Unfortunately, if you're watching the live stream on YouTube today, we're not going to be directly answering the questions on there today, but any questions you have, we will make sure we try and answer them throughout the webinar, and you'll probably find a similar question at the end of the live session too. Okay, so we've got lots to cover today. Let's get started. I'm going to pass you over to Jonathan from the University of Liverpool.
Thanks very much, Megan. I'm just going to share my screen with you guys so you can see the presentation we've prepared for today. That'll help hopefully explore what calculated grades are and how universities will use them. So bear with me 2 seconds. Fantastic. Hopefully everybody can see that great red brick that we've got just there. So what are calculated grades and how will universities use them? The slides are just forwarding themselves on there, so we'll just go back to it a second and ask it to wait. Right, so we've got, apologies, I don't know why it's doing that. We'll just hold that still. So what are calculated grades and how will universities use them? So my name is Johnny Atkinson, and like Megan's just said as well, I work at the University of Liverpool as a student recruitment officer, and I also am the chair for HELOA, which is an organisation full of people who are in similar jobs to myself, and we try to work together to make sure that you have a lot of information about the different choices that are available to you, and you're not only just making a choice about going to university or not, but you're making the right choice and informed decision wherever possible. So today we're going to look at a few different areas about the centre assessed grades. So centre assessed grade, I just want to make it sure that everybody is really clear what that means. So originally it's I'm just going to start this again, actually. I really apologise about that, but the slideshow is just not playing ball. Bear with me 2 seconds. There, I think that should hopefully work for us now. So the grades in 2020, like I said, centre assessed grades. So the term predicted grades is often used. And this isn't what we're focusing on today. So predicted grades were what you were given when you may have done some mocks in year 12, when you were doing your research for which universities you might have been applying to. And they were a time and a place that you were given a predicted grade. But obviously a lot of time has passed since then. So now the grades that the schools have given you for this year are called centre assessed grades. And whenever we speak about centres, what we just mean is a centre is where you have studied or where you'd be sitting your exams. So your school or college would be your centre. We'll move on from the centre assessed grades to what a calculated grade is. And there's a lot of specific language. So obviously, as we go through this, if you've got any questions or comments, please just note them down, and we're going to have plenty of time to try and make sure that we've got this clear to you and answered any questions. So we'll have a look at what calculated grades are. And then really importantly, the main thing is how universities are going to use these grades and what kind of support is there for you when it comes to these different grades and how they're being used by universities. And then we'll just quickly recap, making sure that everything is as clear as it can be for now. And if you've got any outstanding questions, like I said, at the end of the presentations, we'll go to them. So moving straight into it, we've got the centre assessed grades. So these grades are assessed by your centre, by your school or college. So they're separate from the predicted grades, like I've already said. What I will say is that it's really important to understand that there is lots of very specific language. It can be complicated. They have tried to make it as clear as possible, but this is a complicated scenario. So if you don't understand some of the wording or the way that we're going in around these kind of topics, please do ask questions. So like I said, centre, your school or college, not predicted grades. Centre assessed grades have been submitted by your school and college, and they are based on what we call prior attainment information. So prior attainment information is everything that teachers could use to build up the best possible picture of your attainment up to the point where you haven't sat an exam. So what were you going to potentially achieve based on what you've done? And that'll be your mocks if you've done them. It'll be coursework that you've handed in. It'll be homework. It'll be everything that really builds up a picture between you and that teacher about how well you might well do. There's a second factor to that as well. So as well as looking at all of the prior attainment information, which will hopefully give you a fairly accurate grade, they actually have to rank each student as well. So if there were going to be 5 students getting an A and 10 students getting a B, so all of those students who get an A will be the first likely to get an A down to the 5th. And again, for the Bs, they'll be starting from B1 to B10. And that's because grades are really broad. And this will help sort of just basically try to make it a little bit clearer and add a little bit more information to it as well. It really adds further clarity to the whole process. So the thing about this whole sort of situation that is a little bit more fair than previous years is that there's lots of different criteria which are used by exam boards, and this can be very different. So one exam board like AQA can have different assessments or criteria from OCR, but this year, when it comes to it, all of the process is exactly the same across all of the exam boards. So they're using the same kind of criteria to assess your centre assessed grades. We'll move into the sort of the area of calculated grades now. So we've got your centre assessed grades, which is all of your prior attainment information, and it's submitted in the form that the grade that you're expected to achieve and a rank which is assigned to you. And the calculated grade comes in, and it's exam boards collating all of the submissions from all of the schools and colleges right the way across the country, and they apply an algorithm. And this is what we call a statistical standardization, which again sounds very complicated, but basically it is trying to make sure that it's using information from all different years and comparing it to the centre assessed grades. So imagine that we've got your grades from this year and that they've been assessed without obviously sitting an exam. And that is potentially having some variance. It could be that this year's grades are much, much higher or much, much lower than previous years. And in a very basic way, the algorithm looks to make sure that this is standardized, so that it's in line with what's happened in previous years as well. I've got an example in a second just to try and make that a little bit clearer, but essentially centre assessed grades are compared to historic data, and if the assessed grades are very, very different, higher or lower, then that calculated grades looks to create a bit more of a balance. What won't change though is the ranking. So, you know, a student that's placed at 1 or 5 or 10 is still going to be in that position as well. So it's all about the trying to make this as fair and equitable as possible in line with previous years as well. So here's an example, and I will caveat that this isn't something which is as detailed as the information that you might be looking for, but I have put resources and links towards the end of this presentation where you can go and have a look at all of the official documentation. And if you want to get into the real detail of it, then you can definitely go and have a look at that and try and get your head around it. But I just warn that the language can be complicated. So if you have got questions, please make sure you have conversations with people before making any decisions based on the information that you do read. So here's a simple model that I've put together to try and explain the process, which is the assessed grade for 2020. So one school or one college has submitted centre assessed grades for a subject. Let's just, for the sake of it, say this is biology from the college down the road. And they've said that they want 3 students to have an A. They've got 5 students who should have a B, 1 student with a C, and 1 student with a D for this year. And we're going to look at the prior attainment from historically from 2017, from 2018, from 2019. So what have the students on average achieved in previous years? And is that much different from the assessed grades that have been submitted? So we can see that actually in 2017, 18, 19, it was only about 20% of people getting an A grade. It was about 50% of people getting the B grade and 30% of people getting a C grade, for instance. So when we calculate it to try and bring it into a standardized model, what will result in is actually 20% of students should be getting an A. So therefore, we've got 2 A's now. And one of them has changed into a B. So one of the A's is now become a B. 50% of them get B grades. So yeah, absolutely, we've got B's there. One of the B's has now become a C because 30% of the students typically get a C. But that means that also the D grade has been pulled up to a C. So again, you can see that it's trying to make sure that everything is as balanced as can be. Now, I will say it again, that is a super simple version of the model, and I will give you the link to the end if you want to have a look at it in more detail. But hopefully that just makes it a little bit easier to understand about why things might change. So the really important stuff that we've got to talk about here is actually around about calculated grades, what they are and how people will use them. So the first thing to say is that your calculated grade is what you've achieved. It is no different from any other grades that you will have achieved previously, so your GCSEs that you might have already achieved, and it's no different in terms of value to the grade that you would have been given had you sat your exam. The calculated grade is your achieved grade. And that's how universities are going to look at them as well. We're not going to think about these any differently when we receive the information about your grades, which was on Friday from UCAS. We look at that and we treat them exactly the same. So confirmation is a process where we confirm, have people met, exceeded, or missed the grades that we've asked for. So when you were made an offer by a university, they'll say, we wanted you to hit B, B, C. They'll receive your grades and they're going to say, right, has that person met the conditions that we want them to? So confirmation is a long process. We receive your grades and over the weekend and up to today, the people are working really hard right the way through up until Thursday to make sure that we can confirm all of the students in the right places. And then universities will know how many people have met the conditions of their offer. So how many places that they are likely to have for students who've met that offer, and how many places they're going to have which are now available to enter into clearing. So clearing will open the same time that you get your results. And on Thursday, when A-level results and all the rest of the results are released, you'll find yourself either being confirmed and being able to go to the university that you put down as your choice, or entering into clearing. And I know that when it comes to clearing, my colleagues at the University of Derby are going to explain in more detail what clearing might mean for you. I think the really key thing here is that universities are going to take into account lots of information. We know what kind of year this has been, but that those considerations have been applied to everybody. So although COVID and all of the things that have been going on this year feels very personal to you right now, especially almost siloed, you're in the same situation as everybody, and universities want to make sure that they appreciate what's going on with each student. Yet the calculated grades have considered what's going on, applied this as fairly as possible to everybody, and universities will then take that into account. So universities are going to try and make this as fair as possible, and they're going to be open to your questions. They're going to be open to your concerns as well. I think the key thing for you is just do as much research as you possibly can to understand the situation that you might be in. And if you've got ideas about wanting to go to the university you've chosen to and confirmed, that'll be fairly straightforward. But if you're thinking about clearing or anything like that, just to try and do some research now. Try and think about what it is that you'd want as alternative options, and make sure you do some looking around and get some key information about that as well. So just moving on for a quick recap. So you've got a centre assessed grade, and that has come from your school or college. And that has been sent to an exam board who have applied an algorithm to try and create a calculated grade. And the calculated grade is the grade that you've achieved. That information has then been sent to universities, and as part of the confirmation process, universities are currently working out how many people have met the conditions of their offer, and how many places they're going to have left from people who may have not hit that offer as well. Universities are really keen on supporting you, so each university website will have clearing and confirmation details. There'll be email addresses, phone numbers, web forms, lots of different ways of communicating with universities. Please use them to make sure that you don't feel confused or alone at any point of this process. Make sure that you understand your options ahead of the day. So if you are concerned or curious, if you want to allay some of your anxieties about what might happen if you don't hit, that confirmation or that offer that the university of your choice has, then don't be afraid to just look out there and gain some more information about what other options are available to you. As promised, there are a few different resources that you might want to check out. There's an extremely long hyperlink to the official Ofqual documentation. These booklets are around 15 to 17 pages long. They are really good to read, especially if you might be in the position of being a teacher, a parent advisor. I'd highly recommend having a look at them. If you're curious about these, or you want some more information and you want it to be a little bit more condensed, just go onto Google, type in Ofqual 2020 results, and you'll see that there's a host of information comes up. I'd say specifically to students right now that if you've got questions, not necessarily around your grades, but about your options, the student room is a great forum for lots of people to go to, have a look around, make sure that you can talk to other people who might be in a similar situation to you. If you do get some information from there, just make sure that you check it out with an official source, because obviously it's a forum and anybody can say what they like, but a lot of it is really trustworthy information. UCAS will have lots of information about your grades, and then finally universities' websites as well. Get onto the university's website and make sure you have a chat with universities directly should you have any outstanding questions. I hope that makes calculated grades and centre assessed grades a little clearer, and I will be around to answer any questions as we go on.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Johnny. That was a really informative presentation, and I hope that that gave you a lot of the answers that you were looking for in terms of how exactly these calculated grades are put together, what kind of input the centre assessed grade has from your teachers, and how that's then fairly and accurately put together with lots of other information about your school to ensure you get the grade which is most similar to the one that you would have had if you'd been able to sit your exams. Okay, next up we're going to be talking to Alex from the University of Derby. Alex is going to be talking to you about what you can do if you're unhappy with your grades in terms of resits, and also how you can go through clearing to secure a place at another university if you didn't hit your first or insurance choices. Thank you, Alex.
Perfect, thanks for that, Megan. And also thanks, Johnny, for going through in terms of the calculated grade side. I appreciate we're in unprecedented times at the minute, so hopefully the information that we can pass on to you can just either ease some concerns or just answer some queries that you've got. So just bear with me a minute. I'm just going to share my screen just so you can see the presentation I'm going through. Some of you may also notice in the background my colleague from university, Jenny's here as well. So she is one of the, she works within our admissions team. So hopefully can assist in terms of answering some of the questions which have been coming through. So perfect. So as Megan mentioned at the start, we're just going to take a bit more of a look in terms of the resit process, or sort of what happens after you get these calculated grades on Thursday, and then also take a bit of a focus on clearing and adjustment as well. As I said, if you've got any questions, obviously pop them in the chat and we'll try and go through them as the session sort of continues. So like I mentioned, in terms of what we're covering, we're going to touch on resits and what that might look like, mention about clearing and adjustment, also just give a bit of information in terms of some tips of going through that process, and hopefully making Thursday a really smooth and sort of hopefully pain-free day for you if you are going through the clearing process to get into university. So as we've mentioned, on Thursday you will receive your calculated results on results day. That usually gets released live on UCAS in the morning, so you should receive some communication from UCAS about that. Obviously, if you're in school or college, you will probably have had some further information from your teachers and tutors in terms of what that might look like. I know usually it would involve going in and speaking to people, but in the current climate, there might be a whole host of different sort of processes or sort of instances that are occurring. So it's worth just making sure you have all the information on that, so you're clear of what happens on Thursday. But if you are unhappy with the grades that come through, you feel that either they don't quite reflect how hard you've worked or what grade you feel you should have got, these are the main two options that you do have. So you either have the option of resits, which I'll touch on in a minute, or you have the option to go through clearing. So in terms of a resit process, what I will say, so the information that Johnny said from University of Liverpool, that off-qual document, that does also have some information in there in terms of resits. So it is worth, if after today you have got any further questions, doing a bit of research around it. But from the information that they've released, any student that would have been taking an exam this summer, so has been entered for an exam, you may be able to take an exam in the autumn. So obviously you might look at your grade and think, if I'd taken an exam, I would have got a different grade. And that option is there for you to potentially go through and sit that exam in the autumn term. One thing which Ofqual have sort of mentioned in that document as well is that rather than traditionally it being called a resit, it would be classed as a first sit. Obviously you have not sat that exam in the summer, so this would be the first instance of it. And generally that doesn't impact yourself too much, but it's just worth noting that when we're talking through potential offers and that kind of thing, it often is quite a lot of jargon related to it. So it's just worth just having a bit of an awareness of it, really. You can see on the screen, so we've put in that document, they've released some potential dates. so potentially October and November. So for AS and A-level exams, they are planning on this being in October, with the results being released around Christmas time. I mean, if there are any of you that are thinking about potentially having to follow this through for GCSEs, that would be in November, with the results potentially coming out by sort of February time in 2021. What I would say is, obviously this is subject to government guidance. They're the dates that they've penciled in for now. As you can probably appreciate, with things that have been happening in the last few weeks in terms of localized lockdowns and measures being reintroduced or sort of lessened in various different places, this is really fluid in terms of when those dates might be. So it might be that actually October and November is not possible. But what schools, colleges, assessment centres would do, they would communicate this to you and make sure that you're sort of kept in the loop with it, really. If anything does have to change, depending on how the sort of nation progresses with COVID-19 and sort of how any government advice might impact that as well. What I will say is that, and I think it's been mentioned before, universities will be flexible with this. We appreciate that it is a strange time frame for yourselves. It can be quite stressful, and it's a bit of stepping into the unknown. So we will try and be as flexible as possible with this. But what I would really recommend is that after you get your results on Thursday, if this is something which you think you want to do, talk to the universities that you've got offers with. They're the best institutions to be able to talk to. I'm sure you'll be able to appreciate that every university might have slightly different systems or slightly different processes. So it's certainly worth phoning up, talking to the individual universities that you've applied to, and trying to understand how potentially doing a reset, how that might impact your journey to university in the future. Obviously, as I mentioned at the start of the slide, anyone that was entered into an exam is or may be able to take an alternate exam, so that is completely your choice. But obviously that might delay your plans in terms of going to university or sort of the next steps. So this is where clearing might actually become a really good option for you to potentially look and think, should I apply somewhere else, or sort of review what my options are, really. So in terms of clearing, I'm sure the majority of you have heard of clearing, but obviously everyone's knowledge might be slightly different. So in terms of clearing, it is the process which students can go through to get to university and to potentially start in September. As you can see, there's a few different reasons on here which might impact why you end up going through clearing. I've been working on sort of the clearing lines at our university. We've been having phone calls from people that have maybe had a change of heart. They thought, actually, the course that I'd applied to, I want to do something different now. As we mentioned before, your grades might not be what you expected, so you might have to think of different considerations. Or you might actually be sat here right now thinking that you were never going to plan to go to university in September. You were going to go on a gap year. But with the current climate and the restrictions, that might have been put on hold, and you think, actually, maybe should I see if I can get to university this year and see what options are available to me, really. And it can really start to kickstart your journey into university. Obviously, this is dependent on courses and universities, but there are still places available for September. Not every single university place has been taken up, but obviously that does differ from university to university. It does differ from course to course as well. So that's where doing that bit of research further down the line might be beneficial. So in terms of why you should potentially consider it, just some quick information. So like I mentioned, universities still have places in September. So it might be that you phone them up and see if there's somewhere that you prefer to go. Last year, over 73,000 students were accepted through the clearing process. From the sort of indications that UCAS has been sending out, they're expecting this number to grow to potentially be above 80,000 this year. So it's certainly something which isn't necessarily a bad thing to go through clearing. I know plenty of people that have come through clearing and can be really successful students at university, go on to do master's degrees, postgraduate qualifications, really kickstart their career goals that actually coming through clearing might necessarily not be perceived as being available to them, but it's really benefited them going forwards. So it's certainly something to consider. As with a lot of the things which we're covering in this sort of webinar, it's important to go away, have a think about it, talk to some friends and family about it as well, and just get some really good insight in terms of what's going to be the best route for you, really. So in terms of different clearing options, generally, these are the two that are closely related to it. So main clearing, that has been open since the beginning of July. So some of you may have already contacted various different universities about clearing, and registered your details and been getting provisional offers or sort of seeing if that's a potential route for you. Obviously, clearing is mainly in place for people that have not secured an offer. So whether that is that you've sort of left it a bit late to apply, or you've had a change of heart, or on results day, your results aren't quite what you expected and you don't have that place at either a firm or your insurance. So clearing would be that process to go through, contact various different universities and sort of find out if they have places on their courses and go through the application process from there. The other side to clearing, which some of you may be aware of, you may not be aware of, is adjustment. So this works in a slightly different way to the clearing process in terms of it only opens after your results have been sent out. And it's for students that either have met or exceeded the conditions of their firm offer. So it might be that you applied to universities based on your predicted grades, what you thought you was going to get, and that actually, as we saw in the example above, sometimes these grades can move not just down, but they can move up as well. So it might be that you receive your grades on results day and actually you have more UCAS points than what you expected. With this, again, it would be going through speaking to universities, seeing if they'd potentially be able to offer you a place, and going through that process. It is a shorter time period, so you can see that it just runs from the 13th to the 31st. And with adjustment as well, you don't get that full time period, you only get a shorter amount of time. So I believe it's five sets of 24 hours in terms of being able to contact universities, find out if they would be willing to accept you as an adjustment student, and then if that place is confirmed, for your university to update UCAS track and make sure that process goes through as well. So there's a couple of different options, and again, it's worth just having a bit of an overview, a bit of a thought about it, so that come Thursday morning, you've got some information in terms of what your next steps might be. If you don't wake up and find out that you've got into your firm choice, or you've got into the place where you want to go. So as I mentioned, clearing, available to any student. The main sort of process, what we would say, is going through researching which universities you wish to study at and if places are available, and contacting them. What I would say is generally on the Thursday, lots of people are contacting universities. So if you call universities up and you don't get through straight away, do not panic. Generally, that Thursday morning period is when, and I'm sure Johnny will back me up on this, that is when universities are at their busiest time point in terms of calls and trying to sort of go through that clearing process. So if it does take a bit of time, please be patient with us. We are trying to work through as quickly as we can. One thing that will also come out in terms of the clearing process is certain timings. So if you do ring up and you are given an offer, on that communication that comes to you, there will be information in terms of when you need to apply by, what process you need to go through. So just try and stick to that as best as possible. Just so hopefully, not just from your side, from our side as well, the process can be smooth and we can get you onto a course, or you can get onto a place at university. As I mentioned, adjustment works slightly differently. You can register through UCAS track. as I mentioned, you've got those 5 24-hour periods to find that place. If you do get a place, it's really important that you get your new university to confirm with us on UCAS Track, so that we can get all the process sorted. You can get your confirmation letters sent out, but then obviously if you are thinking about accommodation and that sort of thing, you can go down that pathway and get that sorted in plenty of time to start in September. What I'm going to do is just give a bit of a snapshot. Obviously, every university is slightly different, so I'm sure universities up and down the country will have very similar things to this. Generally, so at Derby we have 3 different routes, so you can either call us up and go through the traditional sort of clearing pathway, so we'll have people on the phones throughout Thursday, Friday, over the weekend, and then into the next couple of weeks for people to get in touch with. Universities may be offering some form of physical events. Traditionally, these weren't quite as complicated as they are this year, as you can appreciate with social distancing measures. So it might be that universities are still offering like personalised visits. You can go along, speak to people, have a look around the facilities. Obviously, it might be if you are coming from clearing, you've not visited that university yet, you've not seen what the campus is like. So you do have those physical events, and I can obviously I can only speak for us at Derby, but I'm certain that all the other universities that would be offering this style of event, it'll all be COVID secure in terms of social distancing, maximum capacity numbers, staff, students wearing PPE if they're interacting with you, and just making sure that we're giving the best possible experience that we can in this really tricky time. But also, we're offering live event chats. I'm sure the universities are as well, where you can talk to universities, whether it's over something like this, so Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Unibuddy Live. There's a variety of different platforms out there that universities are using. And it can be a really good opportunity that if you may be feeling a bit nervous about physically coming and seeing us, or you might be shielding, or you might not even be able to come and get to us because you might be out of the country or whatever it might be, that you can still talk to us, have a chat with advisors, student ambassadors, and really get a bit of an insight in terms of what it is specifically to that university, and hopefully to answer your questions as well. So like I mentioned, just to give a bit of sort of background in terms of timings, generally, I'm sure other universities are the same, the physical events will be by appointment only, just so that we can control the numbers that are coming onto campus and make sure that everything's as safe as possible. There's some links on the right hand side if you did want to get in touch about further details. Obviously, I appreciate that not every single person on this call will be considering the University of Derby. Some of you may not even have heard of the University of Derby. So feel free if you do want to have a look through those if you are interested. One thing that I will say as well, so we've got the Unibuddy platform along with a whole host of different universities as well. So do use that. Students will be on hand and in some cases staff to be able to answer questions on an individual basis as well. So I think if there's anything that you take away from the last couple of slides is that there's plenty of support out there for you. We appreciate that in a normal year, clearing can be quite daunting, or if you haven't got your results, it can be a scary time point. And we appreciate that, especially this year, it's even heightened with the sort of new normal that we've been put into for the last 4 or 5 months. So there's plenty of people to talk to. Do not sort of suffer in silence and think, I've got to try and solve this myself. Ask questions, get in touch with people, and just try and find out as much information as possible. So with that in mind, just from my experience of working clearing events over the last couple of years, a couple of top tips which I've covered throughout as well, but I think it's good to reiterate these as sort of takeaway messages for you. So don't panic. It might seem like you've got to make a snap decision on Thursday and time's running out and you need to make a call. everything doesn't happen within the first hour. Clearing runs through all the way through to September. So obviously it does depend on courses and universities. Some courses will fill up quicker than others, but whether it's on results day or whether it's between now and results day, just take the time to think about what options you've got, so that hopefully you can make some good decisions. You can make some relaxed decisions as well that aren't sort of a snap decision because you're a bit stressed, or you feel like you've got to make a call, or you've got to make a decision quickly. So don't panic about it. There is time to be able to go through this. If it ends up that you are going to go through the calling process and go through clearing, before you call to us, make sure you are prepared. Take a few minutes to think, what information may they be asking me for. So chances are they'll be asking about what grades you've potentially got, whether it's A levels, whether it's going back to your GCSE grades. Some courses may be asking about work experience, whether you've met certain criteria, whether you're able to attend a physical or virtual interview going forward. So just have a bit of a think through, and give yourself a few minutes to, even if it's just to write some notes down on a piece of paper, of key things that you think they're going to ask you about, but also questions that you've got for us as well. Obviously our lines and contacts, you can get in touch throughout the time, but if you've rung someone up and you've got them on the phone, that's a really good time point to ask questions as well. And as I mentioned, use the people around you, use your support network. So do not feel like you've got to go through this on your own. I appreciate that it might feel like that because you're sat socially distanced and you're in your bedroom at home with potentially just your family, or it might be just yourself if you're an individual applicant and you've not got that support network there. But try and use it as best as possible. Try and use the virtual options that universities have, such as Unibuddy, such as the live chat functions on the website as well, to hopefully just ease some of those concerns. And if you have got any questions, ask people. Like we've said throughout, we appreciate that it's a really difficult time point, especially this year. So we don't want anyone to feel like they've been left out, or that they've got to go through this on their own. So get in touch with us, get in touch with your teachers and advisors at school or college, get in touch with your friends and family, and just try and get their support through this time period, really. That's pretty much everything that I was going to go through. Obviously, there's our contact details there if you want to get in touch with the university in particular. Final thing that I will say is best of luck with it. Obviously, I hope that every single person on this call wakes up on Thursday morning, they've got into their firm choice, and that everyone's going where they want to go. But if that's not quite the case, get in touch with universities, go through the process. We are here to try and help you through it, and try and make sure that if you do want to go to university and you want a place, that we can get you where you want to go, really. I can see as I've been going through the presentation, there's been quite a few questions popping up. So what we'll do now, I believe, is we'll just hand back over so we can go through some of those questions, hopefully, and answer some of the questions that have been coming through as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Alex. First up, before we start the questions, I just want to reiterate, as we were talking about earlier, if you have any questions about standardization of grades, about averages, about ranking, about what goes into the centre assessed grade, about how this affects A levels, international baccalaureate, BTECs, about resits and appeals, then we really recommend, above all else, looking at that off-call document. That explains everything in more detail than we ever could for you, and especially if you have a really specific question, such as how does behaviour impact my grade, then that's certainly something that you need to look at that off-call document for. You've got time before Thursday, so you've got time to have a read through that, see how it will affect you, but we really do say don't stress out too much. Universities are going to understand. that this year is the year of mitigating circumstances, and they're going to try their best to get you into a place that's right for you, and they're going to be understanding. So we are going to answer some questions now, probably going to do about 4 each for Alex and Johnny. We're not going to be doing really specific ones. Like I said, if you are looking for a really specific answer, then it's best to check off call or email a university and see if they can help you. Okay, so we're going to start with Johnny today. Some unis require students to complete their A-levels within 2 years. However, since these exceptional circumstances, will it be considered still a 2-year entry if I have to do that first sit still?
Yeah, so the key thing to remember here is that these calculated grades are your achieved grade. So this is not treated any differently from having an A-level in previous years. So if you are applying for a competitive course and they say you must achieve these within the 2 years, these are your achieved grades. So it won't be like these are treated any differently and you can now go back and resit and reapply. So these are the grades that you're given, and you should look at these grades on the 13th as the grades that you have achieved, and that will sort of fall in line with any entry requirements that universities are asking for. As always, with this caveat, if you're unsure, double check. There'll be confirmation lines for every university, and you can go back and double check. But it's important for you to understand that there is no difference between the calculated grades and A-levels that have been achieved in previous years. They're equal value.
Perfect, thank you, Johnny. Next up, a question for Alex. If I have an unconditional offer, but my calculated grades are lower than my predicted grades that I put on my UCAS application, will I still get accepted, or is the university going to reconsider based on that?
So it is one of those that it does differ from course to course, and it does differ from student to student. Obviously, it's one of those that sometimes the offer letters or offers that you may have received throughout the year, if obviously you've applied during the main cycle, may state, oh, you need to get 128 UCAS points, or you need to get ABB, or whatever it might be, and that your grades might differ from that. Generally, as universities go through, thresholds do sometimes change, so it might be that you get into that university without the grades that you needed to get. Typically, if you had received an unconditional offer or sort of an unconditional firm, there's sometimes information on those on those confirmation letters in terms of saying, right, you still need to achieve a certain amount. So it's worth just double checking with that. Obviously, it is one of those that, depending on grades across the country and that sort of thing, we do take that into consideration. And it might be that if you think I needed to get 3 Bs and you know that you might get 2 Bs and a C, then you may still get replaced depending on the course, or depending on the other applications that a university have had as well. So it's a bit of guesswork in terms of every student will be slightly different, every university and course will be slightly different. But we do take this into consideration. It's not always have you met the entry requirements, yes or no. There's a bit of a grey area in the middle that universities do look at as well, and sort of base their decision on, really. So.
Thank you, Alex. A question for Johnny next. If a student achieves, say, ABB, and they needed to get AAA to get in, would you recommend them still calling up and having a chat with you to see if maybe they could go on to a different course, or if they could take a foundation year instead?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it follows on from exactly what Alex was just saying there, really, is that although you may have missed what you originally were asked for, there is flexibility as universities confirm places. So the confirmation process for us is how many people overall have achieved the grades that we've asked for, how many spaces do we have. If there are a lot of spaces, then we're going to have to be flexible in line with what nationally has been achieved. And therefore, it's always worthwhile calling the university up and there's a confirmation line. So don't use the clearing line, use the confirmation line to confirm whether or not you've got in for that course. And that is where you can have a conversation about possible things, which we refer to as change course offers, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's, you might have applied for medicine, but you've missed out on your 3 years. Would you like to try biological and medical sciences at ABB or something similar? So yeah, absolutely call the university up first, see what they can do for you. They will try and support you as best they can. If they say no, it is not because you're not good enough, it's because they want to make sure that you're successful and your grades reflect how successful you might be. So it might be that you find a course where you can actually go in on lower grades and then make sure that you're really successful on that course as well.
Perfect, thank you, Johnny. Next up, a question for Alex. So when and where can you sign up for adjustment? And if you go through adjustment, does that automatically cancel your firm choice, or do you need to do that yourself?
Perfect. So in terms of adjustment, it is through UCAS Track. So obviously this function is not live until results day, so you can't necessarily go through it and start now, but it might be something to consider. So yeah, it would be available in UCAS Track. I believe there's a section on there in terms of that you can register for it and sort of allow or sort of let the UCAS know that that's the process that you wish to take. And that is where once that registration's come in, the 5 24-hour periods comes into play in terms of contacting other universities and going through that. It is something that if you get and I'm sure my colleague Jenny will be able to sort of correct me on this if I've slightly misunderstood the process. If you get given an offer from another university, that it is that university's responsibility to go through on UCAS Track and change that and sort of update the position from there, in which point the university that you were at previously will get notified. And obviously the confirmation letters can get resent out to you in terms of what you would receive from UCAS, just stating what university you're going to and the next steps from there, really.
Thank you, Alex. Next up, a question for Johnny. In terms of appealing grades, I know that we won't have the full picture until Thursday probably, or unless people go through that off-call document and get more information themselves about how exactly the appeal process is going to work. But do you have just like a rough guideline you can give students about how appeals might work for them?
Yeah. So essentially, you won't be able to appeal a grade because that information's been taken by your school using that prior attainment data and then applied. The algorithms applied to give you a calculated grade. So you're not appealing against the grade. What you potentially could do, and the best thing to do, is speak to your school and college in the first instance about this. Is about appealing the process. So the only appeal that can be formally lodged is if the school and college believe that the process of how the grades were come to wasn't followed correctly or information wasn't given due consideration. So it's not about appealing your grades, it's about appealing against the process, and the school and college will be the people who will talk to you and give you a lot more information around that. It's really important that before you try and take any steps towards that you go and have a conversation either virtually or in person with school and college so that you understand what that means for you.
Perfect, thank you very much, Johnny. Just to add on to that as well, if you are unhappy with your grades, as Alex was talking about, then clearing and adjustment are a really good option for you. Instead of going through that process, look at other options that might be better for you as yourself, looking at what you can achieve and what's going to fit right for you for your future. Next up, a question for Alex. What happens if I don't receive the grades needed for my first choice, but I don't want to go to my insurance choice anymore? What are the options then?
So I believe one of the main options there would be, obviously your firm choice would be sort of saying that you wouldn't be able to get on. You can potentially go through and you don't necessarily have to accept your insurance choice. So it might be that you've changed your mind, you sort of thought, actually, I don't want to go there. So then that would be going through the clearing process. as Jonathan mentioned, it's worth calling up the university that you had your firm choice with and seeing what the other potential options are. Obviously, depending on courses, there's sometimes some closely related courses or sort of areas that actually can lead to the same place. So, for example, if you wanted to go into, I don't know, if you wanted to be a PE teacher and your application for sports science hasn't been successful, there may be other courses that a university offers in terms of like sports coaching or sort of sports studies that are related courses that you can then still go on and get to the same career point. So it's worth contacting the university that you've got your firm choice and seeing what the other options are there. But then also starting to go through that clearing process. And it might be that actually when you did your application to up to 5 places, that you've got a third choice that you couldn't put down as a firm or insurance, but that might then become a really good option for you. So it's worth having a bit of a thought in terms of, was there other places that I received offers from that I declined initially that actually now would be a good option for me? Ringing up, as we mentioned, getting in touch with your firm choice and seeing if there's any alternatives, or then going through the clearing process and sort of finding alternative universities that you might not have considered before as well.
Perfect, thank you, Alex. And we have another question about clearing for Johnny. Is there any difference really between live chat and hotline for clearing? Live chat is a new phenomenon for this year, really. Is there any advice that you can give students if they're going to apply that way rather than calling up the traditional way?
I think that different universities are in different places. So some universities might have call centres with people spread out very far and wide, obviously socially distancing, and they will have the functionality to speak to you or clearing or confirmation, which obviously is great to chat to somebody, but equally we're living in a world where technology is quick, and actually by sometimes filling in online forms, you're saving the time that you would spend chatting to somebody, and actually you're fast tracking it. So there's kind of 3 approaches that you'll probably find most universities doing. Either what traditionally has happened is that you have to pick the phone up, you'll speak to somebody, they'll take details from you, and then possibly either store those details for you to get a call back from an admissions tutor or pass you through to an admissions tutor for a response. You might have a bit of a hybrid approach where you're directed to a web form, you fill in some details, and then you await a response. And other ones will be entirely online. So the entirely online, exactly what it says, like, you'll fill in your details, that'll go through the processes. The universities may have entered some information in there to automatically send you a response based on the number of places that they have and what they're looking for. I would say that actually it depends more on the university and how quick and how much investment that they've got, rather than how you're communicating them with. So don't worry too much about trying to decide if a phone call or a live chat is better. It's mainly, look at what university you want to apply for and run with their system. So obviously different universities doing different things, but hey, it's 2020. We've all got to use at least 5 different methods of communication to get an answer. It wouldn't be anything else, would it?
Perfect, thank you, Johnny. We just got one more question for Alex today. With adjustment, can I apply for adjustment if I've met the grades for my firm choice, or do I have to have exceeded them in order to go through that process?
So yeah, you can apply if you've met them. Obviously, it might be that you knew that was the predicted grade you was going to get, and you've sort of based that decision on there. Obviously, one thing to consider, and I think we sort of alluded to it in early questions, is that sometimes when it comes to clearing, universities may lower the threshold, so lower the entry tariff. So it might be that a university that you initially thought I cannot apply to because I'm not predicted that grade has actually lowered their threshold into the region where you've got your grades really. So yeah, it can be either met or exceeded, and it's just worth considering that obviously other universities, you might not have considered them, you might have changed of heart in terms of you maybe want to stay a bit more local, or that actually their entry tariff is reduced into into the sort of area that you've got your results at. So it's now a more viable option than it was before. So.
Perfect, thank you very much, Alex. Just to round up then, what we really want to reassure you of today is that you don't need to buy into the big hype that's going on around these predicted grades, and please don't let yourself be worked up about it. Do your research, talk to your universities, wait until Thursday to see what happens, and then we'll go from there. If you do have any specific questions, have a look at that off-call document. That is what all the universities are going to be bearing in mind and what they're working from. So that is the key thing to look at, rather than looking at all these different news stories that are coming out and that are creating a lot of panic. Everything's going to be okay. Everyone's working really hard to make sure that you are going to get results that are most accurate and fair for you, that you're going to get a university place at the end of it. And there's so much information out there about how to apply through clearing, how to apply through adjustment. It's really not a scary process at all. You're either going to be chatting to someone who is there to help you, or you're going to be on the phone to someone. So don't worry about it. It's going to be okay. Everyone's here to make sure that those results are right for you. That was our very last question for today. If you do think that you missed something a little bit earlier on, then the live stream is available on our YouTube. That's the UK University Search YouTube. So you can pop back onto that, have a look through Johnny's presentation again, have a look through Alex's presentation again, get any more information that you need from there. You can also check out Derby and Liverpool's website for all their clearing information. So if you fancy learning a little bit more about them and the things that they have on offer, then definitely go and have a look over there. I'll be sending you their details over on an email later today as well. If you've got any more questions about results day, about clearing, adjustment, deferrals, we're running 2 more webinars this week. So again, at 12 o'clock tomorrow is our results day guide. That one's a really good one for teaching you how to make a plan for results day, how to stay calm, how to stay positive, knowing what to expect, and also knowing what to do if you're unhappy. So that one's tomorrow, and there's 5 different universities involved in that one. On Wednesday is our clearing, adjustment, deferrals webinar. Again, 5 universities on that one. We'll be talking through top tips on how to secure a place. We're talking through what exactly clearing is, what exactly adjustment is. So if you have any more questions about those processes, then definitely check out that webinar on Wednesday at 12. You can sign up to all of them for free on our website, www.ukuniversitysearch.com. And we also have a free clearing directory available. UCAS, you need to talk to a university directly. So if you want to look at a full list of how to contact universities on results day, head to www.universityfinder.org.uk. There's a full directory there. There's also a points calculator and a really easy system to match you up with courses. So have a look on there as well. Thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you to Alex and Jonathan for all of their help, and to Jenny for helping us answer questions in the chat as well. I hope that we were able to provide you with some reassurance and talk you through exactly what to do. I hope to see you again tomorrow for our results day guide webinar, but if I don't, then best of luck on Thursday, and make sure to have a look at all those resources that we mentioned today as well. Thank you.